Welcome to Books versus Movies, the podcast where I try to answer the age-old question, is the book really always better than the movie? I'm Lluvia, an actress and book lover based out of New York City, and today we will be discussing After We Collided by Anna Todd and its 2020 adaptation, After We Collided. Alright, everyone, so I do want to apologize for the sound quality of this episode. Perhaps, maybe there's nothing wrong with it. I won't really know until I play it back. But the reason I say that is because we have officially moved into our new apartment. Yay! We are back to living in the city, and I'm kind of catching up on all the books and series mainly that I've been reading and watching, so I couldn't really wait for me to have a better setup than I have right now. So yeah. Let's go ahead and get started. And I do just want to say that the format of today's episode is going to be different than what I usually do. Mainly because this book just pissed me the hell off. It filled me with so much rage. It just really, it invoked so many negative feelings, and honestly, I'm being 100% serious when I say that I have never had a book that has pissed me off this much. So, I'm like, the reason this book pissed me off so much and just fills me with so much rage, and that I'm just gonna deviate from the usual format, is that this book glorifies a toxic, abusive relationship and passes it off as love. Yeah, I can't with it. As someone who was in an abusive relationship in the past, obviously I have very strong feelings towards something like this, especially since it's glorifying. This is a book aimed at young readers, and the last thing I would ever want is for my nieces, who are 5 and 2, and one will be born within the next few weeks, is for them to pick up a book like this and end up in a situation like me and think that they need to stick around in a relationship like this because their significant other loves them. I just can't review this without having that bias come through. This is just one of the few things that I am unable to be unbiased about. I don't want anyone to end up in a situation like I was. And yeah, so that's why I have such strong negative feelings towards this book, and we'll see how this goes, because like I said, I'm gonna deviate from my usual format, but it's something that I feel very strongly about, that I need to do and kind of just get the message across that this is not okay. So a little bit of backstory on the book. So first of all, this is book 2 in a series of 5, and this will probably, actually no, this is definitely going to be the only book and film I watch in this series. Why did I start with number 2? I don't know. I just started with number 2. There really is no particular reason. I just started with number 2. I skipped number 1, started with number 2, and will not be reading or watching anything else in this series. So yeah, so just so you're aware, this is book number 2. But I know enough about book number 1 and the story of what happens in book/film number 1 to kind of know what goes on. Yeah, so whatever. It's gonna be a lot of this today because I'm gonna try to compose my feelings, but yes. Anyway, so this is book number 2 in the After series, and this book started off as a fan fiction, a One Direction fan fiction, specifically a Harry Styles fan fiction. Hardin Scott, which is the male love interest, as you can guess by his initials, is based off of Harry Styles. So this started off as a One Direction fan fiction that gained a lot of popularity online, and because of that popularity, and Anna Todd ended up getting a publishing deal, and that is how her books ended up being published. I don't believe in banning books. I don't believe in censoring books. I will be the first person to say that. I think books should be made available to anyone and everyone that wants to read them. That being said, I do think that publishers have a certain responsibility as to what they publish, first of all. Second of all, how they market it. And this applies to films as well, but since the book came first, in this instance, I'm focusing on the book because if the book had never been made, the film probably wouldn't have been made. So yeah, I think publishers do have a responsibility to be careful of what they pick up for publishing. There is, yes, this was a very, very popular fan fiction, but, and it's, yes, it was read by countless readers. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it was, I mean, it was so popular that it ended up getting a book deal. Yes, it was seen and loved by a lot of people online. That is still a niche group of people, and it's still a limited number of people that read this, as opposed to this getting a publishing deal and being introduced to millions of readers, and then to then get made into a film, which then exposes it to even more readers. There's just a responsibility here. And I understand that publishing is a business, and especially one of the big 5 publishing houses, they care more about money. Bottom line, they care about selling books and getting more money into their pockets. I can understand that. Again, I feel so strongly about this because the target audience are young females. They are teens, women in their early 20s. That's the target audience. And we are already fed so much about what is expected of us, of what a partner expects of us, what we should be doing for our partners, what we need to be doing to be more desirable, and to just care more about the money than saying, yo, this is dangerous. This is not what you should aspire. And it's easy to say, well, yeah, but I hope you know what I'm trying to say. It's hard for me to formulate it into words, but yes, there is a responsibility there. And I will say there are plenty of people. This book has majority 5-star ratings on Goodreads, and a lot of the people that have rated this book 5 stars admit that this book is awfully written. It's absolute garbage, but it's a trash fire that they can't turn away from. It's like a horrible accident that they just have to keep, they know it's bad. They shouldn't read it. They shouldn't look at it, but the curiosity and the desire to hate read it is overpowering. And some people rate it 5 stars knowing, not because they like to hate read it, but because they just really enjoy the smut. They think the smut is just really hot and spicy, and they get off on it. And look, I have no judgment whatsoever towards people that love to hate this book. And I also offer no judgment towards the people that just love to read it for the smut. No judgment there whatsoever. My concern lies mainly with the impressionable young people that may read this and may start to think that the behavior that this couple shows towards each other is acceptable when it is 1,001,000,000% acceptable. Oh, sorry, not acceptable. It is 1,001,000% not acceptable. So I know this is like a really long, really long disclaimer. If you are one of those people who love to hate read this book, right, you are allowed to do so. And this episode isn't necessarily for you. Please keep listening, but just know that this isn't aimed at you. This is aimed for anyone who may not know that this behavior isn't okay and may start and may see tendencies like this in their significant other and think it's okay to put up with because it just means their partner loves them. All right, so let's get started. So the book, After We Collided, follows our main character Tessa and her boyfriend Hardin Scott. So as I said, Hardin Scott is based on Harry Styles, and I believe I read somewhere that Harry Styles is aware that this series, Hardin, is based off of him, and he is not too happy with this interpretation of him, and I can't say that I blame him. I would be very insulted if someone wrote fan fiction that portrayed me in this way. So in book 1, Tessa is dating another boy who treats her just fine, but he's boring, and he's a good guy, but Tessa can't end up with a good guy because that's boring. She needs to have the bad boy. So that's what happens. So essentially, Hardin and his other friend Zed make a bet saying that they're gonna be the one to take Tessa's virginity, and Hardin ends up winning that bet and shows the bloody sheets as proof that he's the one that won the bet and took her virginity, which should I even discuss that outdated idea that everyone bleeds after their first time having sex? Like, newsflash, the hymen can break anytime that for reasons not related to sex. So some people don't bleed their first time having sex. So let's get that antiquated idea out of here. And some people actually have sex and their hymen don't break. So again, hymens and bleeding do not prove that you took someone's virginity. Okay, but anyway, in this case, it proves that he took her virginity. And she finds out and they break up, and that is where we start off book 2. They are not together because, understandably, she feels betrayed after finding all of this out. And so in the film and the book, she's working at a publishing company, and she goes on a business trip to Seattle with her coworkers, and while on this trip she gets drunkenly calls Hardin and says, "I'm partying and I'm better off without you," or something along those lines. And she's getting kind of close to her coworker Trevor, which again, Hardin is not with Tessa at this point, but she is still his property. So of course this pisses him off. He has to go stop her from doing something she shouldn't be doing with Trevor. So she's drunk. Trevor takes her back to the hotel, and at some point she ends up spilling like more alcohol on him, so he takes off his shirt to get it dry. And this is when Hardin shows up. Of course, he threatens Trevor, kicks him out of the room, and Tessa begins seducing him. And even though he knows he shouldn't do it, she really wants him to, so he does it. She is drunk. She cannot consent. So it doesn't matter how much she drunkenly wants it, quote unquote, drunken wants it while she's drunk. She can't consent. You're supposed to say, "No, Tessa, I will not have sex with you." But he does. He does. And the next day she wakes up and she's like, "I can't believe that I had sex with you. Just know that it's because I was drunk. And I can't believe you would have sex with me while I was drunk because I'm drunk." And he says, "Oh, you made me have sex with you." She did not do that. No one can make you have sex with them, period. You say no. You are drunk. I'm going to take care of you. And then in the morning, once she wakes up and she's no longer drunk and then she wants to do it, by all means, she is drunk. She cannot consent. You say no. End of story. But more than anything, it was that line that pissed me off. "You made me have sex with you." No, you are an asshole. So you had sex with her when she was drunk. So at this point in the film, she kicks him out. They go back to wherever they live, somewhere in Washington that's not Seattle. And they don't get back together at this point, obviously. So she goes back to the apartment that they share, and she finds the birthday present he was going to give her. And while she's still in the house, his mom shows up. Hardin and his mom show up, and she doesn't realize that they're not together anymore. So he says, "Hey, can you pretend that we're still together, because my mom is really excited to meet you and I just didn't know how to tell her that we weren't together." And she says, "Okay, yeah, I'll pretend like we're still together." And then at night, when they're in bed, this is the film, they have sex, and then that's when they are officially back together. In the book, it takes a little bit more than that. She finds out that, kind of the same thing. She shows up to the apartment and discovers that they, like, Hardin never told his mom that they weren't together anymore, and she agrees and pretends that they're still together, and she hangs out with his mom, and as she's hanging out with his mom, and therefore by association him, because they're acting like they're together, they decide to give it another shot, and that's how they end up back together. In both the film and the book, they go to a Christmas party at his father's house. So Hardin's father was an alcoholic, and he like was drunk and not home, and he owed a lot of people money. And so those people, in retaliation, like, broke into their house and sexually assaulted Hardin's mom. And while Hardin, all he could do is watch. And this happened when he was a little boy. I want to say he was like 8 or 9 when this happened. So he has nightmares, and obviously nightmares about this. And Tessa's the only one who can keep those nightmares at bay. And so, yeah, they go to a Christmas dinner at his father's house, and he gets in a fight with his dad. He, like, destroys all this property, and at that point they go back home. Oh my gosh. Okay. Like, at this point I'm almost done describing the movie, and there's still, like, the book is 600 freaking pages long. The film only took literally the first half of the book, and that's what constituted the film, because you don't need the last 300 pages of it's all filler. Whatever. That's all right. Hardin's mom goes back to England, but not before. So this is just in the book. She figures out that Hardin's mom figures out what Hardin did to Tessa about the whole bet and the showing of the sheets, and she's like, I can't believe you did that, Tessa. You need to, like, break up with him forever. This is, like, he's my son and I love him, but he has, like, a history of doing stuff like this. And Hardin admits that, like, he used to go around and, like, take girls' virginities for fun, and it got really bad with this one girl because she was a good little church girl and she lost her virginity to him, and so her family kicked her out. And so she was so in love with Hardin that she went to him and was like, can I live with you? And he's like, no, you mean nothing to me. I already took your virginity. And he abandoned her. And so Tessa briefly breaks up with him at this point, because she can't be with him, because that's an awful thing to do. And it is an awful thing to do. I support her breaking up with him, but does she stay broken up with him? No. All the red flags are a-waving, but she just can't stay away from him because she loves him. And she knows that he loves her, and she can fix him. This is the portion of the podcast where I say, you do not need to fix anyone. It is not your job to fix anyone, okay? If someone is that effed up, they need professional help. They don't need you to give him chance after chance after chance and forgive him and forgive him and forgive him. No, especially if he does what Hardin continues to do, which we will continue talking about. So yes, of course, they get back together because that's what they do. So then we go into the new year, and in the film and the book, Tessa agrees to go to a party at his old frat house, and so they go to his old frat house, and he disappears for a while, and then he comes back, and they have sex in his old room. And then once they're done having sex, as they're leaving, this girl's like, thanks for your company, Hardin. And so automatically Tessa thinks, oh, he's cheating on me. So in retaliation, she kisses a random guy that's outside the frat house, and Hardin beats him up. Now, it is not okay for Tessa to have kissed a random guy at the party. Definitely not condoning that. That is not something you do. There are healthier ways to handle your partner potentially cheating on you. Hopefully you trust your partner and you can have a conversation of what was that about, and he can tell you. So what happened was that Hardin was having a conversation with that girl who's the little sister of one of his friends who's based on I don't know which One Direction member, and essentially he did something to her as well. well probably took her virginity and abandoned her. So he was apologizing for his past behavior, and she forgives him. And so that's what that remark was. If you do not trust your partner, where you see something like that and your automatic reaction is, oh, he's cheating on me, that is not healthy. There should be mutual trust between you and your partner. There should not be jealousy in that case. If you have that much jealousy towards each other, that isn't healthy. And you should probably figure out, maybe with a relationship counselor. Mainly, the point I'm trying to make is that you should trust your partner and not automatically freak out with what is an innocent interaction. And mind you, I don't blame Tessa for automatically thinking that Hardin's cheating on her, but if she is that paranoid, she shouldn't be with him. All right, so understandably, I will give Hardin that. Understandably, he does get pissed off. I would be pissed off if Orlando just kissed a random girl. And so they fight and break up. Yes, folks, they break up again. What breakup number is this? I don't know, but they have broken up again. And yes, they do get together immediately afterward. Oh boy. So in the film, the third point of the love triangle is made up of Trevor, her co-worker that works in the publishing company with her that ended up shirtless in Seattle, that guy. In the book, the third point of the love triangle is Zed. If you will remember, Zed is the other guy that was in on the bet with Hardin that was trying to take Tessa's virginity. So let's not even, that's anyway. So I will say I've blocked out some of the more smaller aspects of the book and the film. I don't remember. I think this is like the final breakup in the film. It's not the final breakup in the book, but it's the final, if I'm not mistaken, this is the final breakup in the film before they get back together until the film ends, and for them to probably break up 10,000 times more in the third film. So yes, they break up, and Tessa is, sulking. She keeps working at the publishing house. Her other worker, Kimberly, who's dating the boss, is just so happy. And then there's a party at the boss's house where he proposes. This whole time, Trevor is trying to get with Tessa, and then Hardin shows up and is like, I'm sorry that we're broken up. I miss you. Let's get back together. So they get back together. And then Trevor is in the bathroom and essentially ends with him saying, I'm going to keep fighting for you, Tessa, or something along those lines. And then the film ends with Tessa's dad showing up. They not at the party. They're like, Tessa and Hardin go somewhere else. And the dad happens to show up, and he's like this homeless alcoholic, because apparently everyone's an alcoholic in this world. But anyway, so that's where the film blessedly ends. But in the book, we still have 300 more pages to go. So this whole fight leads Tessa straight into Zed's arms, which pisses Hardin off. And so I don't know why they made Trevor the point of the triangle in the film. I don't know if this is a nod to the third film, like the third book. I don't know if in the third book, and I don't care to find out, I don't know if the third book Trevor's pursuing her a little bit more, and since maybe Zed, this is the last we see of Zed, and Trevor becomes the third point of the triangle in the third book. This is speculation. Obviously, I'm not going to find out. But I'm thinking that's what happened, so that's why the third point of the love triangle in the film is Trevor. Otherwise, I have no idea, because Trevor's kind of just like this. Again, he's a really nice, sweet guy that would probably treat Tessa well. But he is so bland and boring because he's a good guy. Tessa needs the drama that only Hardin can provide. So, okay, in the book, before the proposal party at I remember what happens in the book that leads to these next events. So Kimberly, the coworker that's dating the boss has a son from a previous relationship, and at one point he gets food poisoning and she needs to take him to the hospital. So she asks Tessa to watch his son, and so she agrees. Kimberly brings the son over. The son mainly wants to hang out with Hardin for whatever reason, and as they're talking, the little boy's like, oh, she's really pretty, and are you married? And Hardin says, no, I'm never gonna marry her. And Tessa overhears this and she's like, I know this was always gonna be the reality of our relationship, but it just felt like I don't mean anything to him, and that really hurts my feelings. So that night, after the little boy gets picked up, and Tessa goes to bed early, and Hardin's the one that stays up with the little boy until he gets picked up. So after the little boy gets picked up and Hardin goes to bed, Tessa is saying Zed's name in her sleep. So Hardin obviously is like, what the hell? Why is she saying his name in her sleep? And this drives him. He just cannot stand Zed. Zed is not a good guy, even though Hardin did the exact same thing that Zed was trying to do, but whatever. So he just can't handle it, so he leaves, gets home. He leaves, gets drunk, comes home the next morning, and starts destroying things and saying, like, bad things about Tessa. So Tessa breaks up with him, and she kicks him out and breaks up with him, and they break up. And I just want to say to anyone listening out here, if you are on and off that often, you should probably stay off for a while. If you are meant to be together at some point, you will find your way back to each other. I can assure you, but if you are that on and off constantly, then you need to stay off. I know that might be difficult for some people to hear, but you need to stay off because clearly whatever is wrong in your relationship at this point is not getting fixed. And it doesn't need to be a toxic, abusive relationship like Tessa and Hardin's. Just overall, whatever is causing you guys to constantly break up is obviously not getting fixed. So you need to be off for a while. And as I said, if you're meant to be together, you will find your way back to each other. But until then, you need to stay off. It's not healthy to stay in the cycle of getting together and breaking up, getting together, breaking up, getting together and breaking up. You're just hurting yourselves. You might break up and somewhere along the line find and marry, or not, maybe not even marry if you don't want to get married, but find the person that you want to truly be with. And you'll realize how silly it was to have been stuck in this relationship for as long as you were. Or as I said, you find your way back to each other. And after you have found your way back to each other, maybe that's when it's meant to stay on for many, many years, for the rest of your life if you wanted to. But just wanted to throw that out there. All right, anyway, back to Tessa and Hardin. Again, mumbling someone's name in your sleep doesn't mean anything bad. She could have been mumbling his name in her sleep because they're lab partners or something. I don't know. She might not even know. She might wake up and not even know what she was dreaming about. That happens to all of us, I think, where we wake up and we know we had an odd dream, but we just don't remember it. Anyway, that means absolutely nothing. So he breaks up with her. She kicks him out because he says some things while he's drunk, and yeah. And they break up for 11 whole. This is the longest they've been broken up ever. This is the longest they've ever gone without communicating with each other. Hardin flies home to England to be with his mother, thinking that the relationship is over forever. And spoiler alert, can you guess that it's not? Of course it's not. Anyway, and Tessa is like, why aren't you fighting for me, Hardin? She like calls and leaves him a voicemail and is like, why aren't you fighting for me? I can't believe you're not fighting for me. How dare you not fight for me? And he completely ignores her. And so she ends up with Zed. She runs right into Zed's arms. Now, she just has to ask Zed, what would have happened if you had been the one to win the bet? And he says, I'd like to think that unlike Hardin, I'd make you happy all the time. This is not someone she should want to be with. He admittedly is, I don't know how it is in the first book. I'm a little bit more pro Zed than I am Hardin. I am anti-Hardin 1,000,000%. That being said, he still was one of the people to bet that he was going to take your virginity. And he was like, I'm so sorry I never told you. I wanted to tell you so many times. I wanted to quit so many times. Okay, you wanted to. You never did, though. You never did. You are not much better than Hardin in that sense. But, you know, he is at least making an effort to prove that he is trying to change for the better, or that he did change for the better, and that he really regrets ever having done that, which kudos. What's wrong with Trevor? Book Trevor, not film Trevor. Film Trevor is just as much of a snake as these guys are. But book Trevor, his only crime is that he's one-dimensionally boring, and that is the fault of the author. But you know, he looks like he can treat you well. Why are you gonna go with the other guy that was whatever. I'm not. Moving on. So she ends up with Zed. Like, on day 7, they start, like, getting closer and kind of dating. And that is, at some point, she, like, Hardin gets the voicemail saying, like, why aren't you fighting for me? And he's like, you know what, I am gonna fight for her. And he flies back to the States, and he ends up at the party, the engagement party, that I'm just gonna call it that, the engagement party. And before he goes inside the house, he sees Tessa and Trevor interacting, and he's like, you know what, I need to not get back together with her. I need to stay broken up. This is the first rational, logical thing he said. I need to stay broken up with her, and she needs to be with a guy that treats her well. Someone like Trevor, or even like Noah, who's her ex-boyfriend that she breaks up with in the first book to be with Hardin. She needs to be with someone like that, not someone like me. But at that point, she looks up and sees him outside. No, not Tessa, someone else sees him outside. I think it's like the boss sees him outside and tells him to come in, and he ends up seated next to her, and she's like, at some point she has to go, and so she goes outside, and Hardin follows her, and she's like, I can't get back together with you. And he's like, I know, I was just coming to that realization that you need to be with someone that treats you well, and so I came here to tell you that. And at that moment, Zed shows up to pick her up from the party, and as soon as Hardin sees that she is with Zed, all bets are off. He's like, oh hell no, I am not breaking up with you just so you could end up with Zed. Zed is an awful person. He's not the nice guy you think he is. So F you are not going to go back with Zed. And she's like, no, I can be with whoever I want. We're not boyfriend and girlfriend. So she leaves with Zed. And so meanwhile, he goes back to his father's house. So his father ends up marrying her best friend's mom. So his stepbrother's her best friend. So he goes and to ask her stepbrother for advice. His stepbrother, her best friend, for advice. And so this is the actions of the best friend. Looking back on it now make me angry, but I guess I can't be too mad because I knew exactly who to talk to when I was having relationship problems with my jerk face. I knew which friends were gonna tell me that he was no good for me and which friends were gonna enable me to stay in that relationship. And when you are in a relationship like that, it's not that you want to prove everyone wrong. You want to prove that you know him better than they do, or you know that person better than they do. So it's not that I was completely brainwashed and blind to things that I shouldn't have been at that point in time. And I didn't want to hear my friends that saw what I couldn't see badmouth him. I wanted the friend that wasn't going to badmouth him, that was going to give me advice that I thought was what I needed to hear. And it wasn't. I needed to, and I will say, if you have any friends in that situation, as much as it sucks and it's frustrating as it is, there's nothing really you can say. They are going to keep going to that person. Now that being said, these were my friends talking to me. There would definitely have been a huge difference with my friends that saw how he treated me and did not like him and still tried to keep us, like, if he went to them for advice on what he could do to help his relationship with me, it'd be different if they were saying, oh, you just need to do this and she likes that. No, I think my friends definitely would have been like, okay, well, like, you're not good for her, so break up with her, you know? Because that's what his friends did to him. But that was because they didn't like me for whatever reason, and they would tell him that he deserved better. Guess what? I'm the one that deserved better. But anyway, I digress. I just needed to get that off my chest. But anyway, so he goes to the stepbrother / best friend, and the stepbrother is like completely enabling this and being like, well, she loves you, so, you know, you gotta let her trust that she'll make the right decision, that she'll pick you because that's what she wants. Her friend is, / stepbrother is the toxic emotional abuser. Please do not tell them to try to work things out with their significant other that is being emotionally abused, don't give him that advice. Yeah, all right. So anyway, Hardin says, fine, I will give her space to make the right decision. Actually, no, I'm not, because it's Zed and I hate Zed and she cannot be with Zed. She can be with anyone she wants to be except with Zed. And since she's choosing Zed, she has to break up. She needs to go with me instead. So he literally goes over to Zed's apartment, barges in, and starts fighting with Zed, sees that Tessa is wearing his clothes. They didn't sleep together, like sex sleep together. They were sleeping in the same bed though. And she was wearing his clothes because she didn't have pajamas. And so Hardin sees that she's wearing his clothes and he cannot handle it. He just starts threatening he starts threatening Zed. And Tessa agrees to go with him because that's the only way he will not follow through with these threats against Zed. You have no right, Hardin has absolutely no right to tell Tessa who she can or cannot be with. That is not your girlfriend anymore. You are broken up. If you have broken up with someone and they show up and start threatening the person you are now seeing, they have absolutely no right to do that. You are not their property. So he starts threatening Zed. She goes back with him and they continue fighting with each, she continues living at, they're broken up, but she continues living at his dad's house because she has nowhere else to stay. And he shows up and they kind of make up, but she's like, no, I'm not ready to get back together with you. I need more time because what the hell was that behavior? And he's like, I trust that, but you have to stop seeing Zed. You can't even be friends with him. She is not your property. You have no right. You are broken up. You have no right to tell her what she can or cannot do. You are not together. Now, I really quickly, if you as a couple decide that you need to set some boundaries and a mutual friend, something just makes you uncomfortable and you don't feel comfortable with your significant other hanging out with that person alone, and they give you a legitimate reason that's not just jealousy as to why you can't be, they don't want you hanging around with that person, that's different. This is not that. They are not together. He has no right to tell her that she cannot see Zed anymore. So she continues seeing Zed, and Hardin finds out. They end up getting back together at some point, and then to make sure that Zed never talks to her again, he goes and beats him up to the point where he gets arrested. Hardin's dad works at the university, so he goes and pulls Tessa out of class, and they both go to the university jail, and they're pretty much like, well, we're gonna arrest him because that Zed guy wants to press charges against him. And Hardin is like, well, Zed, the reason I beat him up is because he said he had slept with you. Is that true? And Tessa's like, I already told you I didn't sleep with him. How many times are you gonna ask me that? You should not, again, it is not healthy for your partner to be that jealous. Your partner should not be questioning you. And again, if you sleep with someone when you are not together with your partner has no right to get mad at you at that point, just like you have no right to get mad at them if they slept with someone. You are not together. You are not in a relationship. You are not committed to each other. All right. Anyway. So despite all this, because we gotta enable him. This is how we get people like Brock Turner out in the world. The dad and Tessa are both like, well, let's see if we can convince Zed not to press charges, even though he beat him up and broke his nose. So Tessa goes to the hospital and is like, please don't press charges. Zed says, no, I'm gonna press charges. Please don't press charges. Fine, I won't press charges. Why? I don't know. Because Tessa's that persuasive. I don't no. Yeah, and Hardin deserves to be punished. Okay, no. So he ends up not going to jail because that guy doesn't press charges, and then it ends the same as the film. They run into her dad somewhere else. The end. Story's over. The amount of slut shaming in this book, just calling girls whores because they have a high body count, or calling someone a slut because, literally Hardin calls every single girl that slept with him a slut. Not Tessa, because she's so pure and virginal and so innocent She's not a slut. But every other girl that has ever slept with him, they are sluts. Like, and he's not the only one that slut shames. Tessa does too. At one point, Tessa is like, I'm not like those whores you used to sleep with. No, not acceptable. We don't know. All right. So yeah, the other thing is the amount of red flags. And I hopefully you see the emotional abuse in just my descriptions of the book. But if you don't, so at one point when Tessa is starting to get with Zed, they're kind of starting to date. They're not officially together or anything. They're just casually dating at this point. She says things like, Zed makes me happy. I don't have to question his motives. You shouldn't be with someone if you are constantly questioning their motives. That's not okay. She also says something along the lines of like, he doesn't say things just to piss me off. Your partner shouldn't be telling you things just to get a rise out of you. Yes, there are things that are maybe like cutesy that your partner does that gets under your skin a little bit. They maybe tease you a little bit. That's all, that's all fine and well. But for her to say he doesn't say things just because they piss me off. There's a difference between teasing your partner and if they're okay with it, obviously, or doing little things that are maybe annoying. There's a difference between that and just straight up saying something that's to provoke them, to cause an argument, to cause them to be pissed off at you. There is a huge difference. If your partner is doing that, that is not okay. The amount of times that Hardin is violent. No, he never puts his hands on Tessa, but he punches walls, he breaks furniture, he destroys furniture. That is still a form of abuse. He just because you don't put your hands on someone doesn't mean they're not being abusive. That is scary to see your partner react in anger that way, to not know whether one day that anger will turn on you, towards you. That is scary, and that is not okay. All right, so I mean, I think it's fairly obvious. The book sucks. It's absolute garbage. So yeah, this book is awful. It's terrible. I don't recommend anyone read this book. I don't recommend anyone watch the film series either. If I had to choose, if it's not obvious, the film is the one that wins this round. It is million times better than the book. Yes, Hardin and Tessa are still toxic. Hardin is still an awful boyfriend. We have in the film Josephine Langford playing Tessa, and Hero finds Tiffin playing Hardin. Kudos to them. Josephine inserted some personality into Tessa, and Hardin, Hero as Hardin. Obviously, the film is still portraying a horrible relationship that no one should ever look up to. But you know what? Hero injected some sort of humanity into Hardin. Maybe because they only did the first half of the book, and yes, there are still some awful things that Hardin does to Tessa in that first half of the book, but the stuff that really pissed me off, the scene that just really got under my skin in that first half was you may have sex with you is not that's really the only thing that pissed me off on the first half of the book. The second half was just when I was constantly angry. As soon I had to take breaks from reading this book. As soon as it was time for me to get back into it, my blood would start boiling, and it would stay boiling. It's things like that they changed in the film. He never says, you made me have sex with you, Tessa, while she was drunk. He still does, but he doesn't say that. While the film still portrays a toxic couple, yeah, the film managed to cut out some of the really, really victim-blamey lines, which makes it a little bit better in that sense. So yeah, because of all the cuts that the film made for the adaptation, the film wins, hands down. Still don't recommend that you watch it, but, beggars can't be choosers in this instance, I guess. The film, while obviously I knew that I was watching this awful, horrible, toxic couple that no one should ever strive to have that kind of relationship, I found myself more rolling my eyes at the film and kind of just being annoyed by it but it didn't fill me with the amount of rage that I felt while reading the book. And that's because of those minor changes. Like I said, those minor changes, getting rid of the victim blaming, the slut shaming, those aspects improved it a little bit. Not much, but at least I can watch it and not be filled with rage. Really, the only part of the film that made me really angry was their use of Love Me or Leave Me by Little Mix, which is one of my favorite songs in the whole entire world. Because okay, so that song is all about seeing a relationship fall apart and desperately hoping that it can be saved, that you can find a way to save it. And if there is absolutely no way to save it, to just leave the relationship sooner rather than later, so your heart doesn't keep breaking as you see it fall apart over and over again. It is an absolutely beautiful song. And I know that's what they were trying to go for. That's what you're supposed to feel for Hardin and Tessa. But no, you don't feel that way for them. It's just like, no, just leave the relationship and never come back to it, because Hardin is an awful person. So yeah, that honestly, that was the only part that pissed me off. As soon as that piano, those opening chords started playing, I lost my little mind, because that song should not have been, that is such a beautiful song, and it should not have been used for the soundtrack of such an awful relationship. Anyway, I think I've ranted long enough, and I hope that anyone listening to this kind of understands where my anger and frustration is coming from, and hopefully, if you can learn to recognize at least some red flags based on what I told you is not okay in this episode. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Books versus Movies. Next week, I will be covering the book Dare Me by Megan Abbott and its TV adaptation Dare Me, which initially aired on the USA Network, but eventually found its way to Netflix.